Hi, I'm Whitney Sullivan here for RT Book Reviews magazine, and I'm chatting with author Gail Foreman about her new book, Where She Went. So first, I have a couple of quick questions about If I Stay, which is it's such a heart-wrenching book. So in If I Stay, Mia, your heroine, loses her family to a car accident and kind of has to decide whether or not to come out of a coma.
Right.
And so I have to ask first, did you know that you were going to do a follow-up to it while you were writing If I Stay?
No. In fact, when I started writing If I Stay, I didn't even know what Mia's decision was going to be. So until about halfway through the book. And unfortunately, one of the problems with talking about Where She Went is it's kind of a spoiler because it's about Mia and Adam, although it's really Adam's story 3 years later. But I had no idea that I would write another book. It sort of ends and it's kind of settled. But what happened was, I finished it and was moving on and was working on another book, and Adam and Mia started sort of whispering in my ear, and they wouldn't be quiet in that way that sometimes characters are, and they got louder and louder, and I realized that their story wasn't finished.
Well, I mean, I for one am glad that it wasn't, because I loved If I Stay, and it is so heart-wrenching. I have to say, I took a break in the middle of reading it because I was like, if she dies, it's going to devastate me.
Right.
So can you tell me, was there anything unexpected about writing If I Stay?
First of all, I didn't know what her decision was going to be, so that was unexpected. So much was unexpected. I mean, the process of writing a book is unexpected. I was just talking to somebody they asked me, well, how did you come up with that scene in If I Stay where me and Adam play each other like instruments? It's sort of a kind of sexy scene there. And that was another one of those examples of where characters lead you down roads that you would never go down on your own, but that was something that Adam decided to do. And when I came up with that idea through Adam, I was so surprised. I was like, whoa, that's kind of crazy and out there and a little sexy, and let's go with that. So there was just a lot of things that were surprising. And the whole book, when I started the book, I wasn't even sort of sure where I was going with it. Everything from the structure, the 24-hour structure, and the flashback, it just kind of unfolded as I wrote. So the whole book was just kind of a surprise.
My next question is, for Where She Went, you are talking through Adam, and we see the entire story from Adam's perspective, but it's the next chapter in their life. What was it like to write primarily through Adam as opposed to primarily through Mia?
It's interesting because it was easy in that I knew Adam really well from already having written him in If I Stay. So writing from a guy's perspective wasn't hard, but it was really challenging to write this book because of where Adam is. I mean, I'm going to give a slight spoiler here, because nobody dies in Where She Went. But it was a much darker place for me as a writer to be in, writing it, than in If I Stay, where I was in Mia's head, even though Mia is surrounded by all this devastation, has to make this horrible choice, because Mia is surrounded by so much love in that book. And so it was a beautiful place to just be in her head and watch Mia sort of fall in love with Adam and see Mia and her family. Now, Adam, in Where She Went, it's 3 years later, and he and Mia are not together. And Adam is a rock star, and he's just barely keeping it together. I mean, he's got this life that most people would dream of, but he is barely keeping it together. And so much of his anguish is around Mia, who left for Juilliard 3 years ago, and then Adam has not heard from her since. She just sort of dropped him without a word. And so he is in this sort of state of kind of anguish and confusion. And he and Mia see each other for this one night, and he kind of lives in his own head, and he's just so still full of love and torment for her. So that was really kind of a hard place to be. And also, this is a crazy thing, Adam is angry at Mia, and writing from him, I was angry at Mia, and I love Mia. I love her so much. So it was this kind of really kind of crazy divided state to be in.
And I think that definitely shows. I mean, there are these beautiful passages at the beginning of each chapter with Adam's music, and they're as hard to read as the story with Adam. The lyrics,
yeah, the record that shot Adam's band Shooting Star to such fame is called Collateral Damage, and the present tense chapters of the book, they all start with the lyrics from that album. So it gives you kind of an insight to where Adam was when he wrote those lyrics, and those lyrics were really, really hard to write.
Well, they sound as though I want to go out and buy Collateral Damage now and put it on my iPod.
Thank you.
They are very much, they get you right where it matters. Now, music is such a big part of both of these books. Can you tell me a little bit about your own background, with music, kind of what you had to research or what drew you to the different musical styles?
Sure. I'm just a music fan. I've never really been a musician. I'm not a musically inclined person. I mean, I took piano lessons for a while and I played guitar very briefly, but I'm not talented in any which way. But I've always been one of those people for whom music has been, it's like a quick conduit to my heart. Like, it's just an emotional trigger. So I've always been a music fan, and I think, that's one of the reasons that I think music is such a kind of backbone of both books. But in terms of research, Mia as a cellist she just arrived in my imagination, fully formed as a cellist, and that was just a big surprise to me. I was like, okay. And so that required a lot of research in both books. In terms of the rock and roll element, Adam being kind of like the indie rocker, my husband was in lots of bands, when we were sort of younger. And so like that, I was always, on the side for that kind of thing. So I knew that. And that whole, the indie rock, punk rock music, that sort of runs more toward my taste. So that was easy enough to sort of put in there. So that, in If I Stay, the cello music, that was all researched. The other stuff was stuff I knew. For Where She Went, the rock star stuff, that was one part research and one part imagination, because it's not really that easy to track down rock stars and be like, hey, what's your life like? So you just kind of imagine it. I mean, there's enough out there that you can kind of imagine what that kind of public life would be and that sort of melting down. So that I just sort of had to think, what would it be like to have that kind of public life, and what would it be like for somebody like Adam? And then with Mia, I talked to some professional cellists to sort of see, like, what would your sort of the early trajectory of your career be like if you were just starting out?
So during Where She Went, Mia takes Adam through a tour of her favorite hidden spots in New York City. So can you tell me a little bit about what constructing that tour was like?
Sure. Mia calls that her urban Easter egg hunt. And it's a lot of my favorite secret spots of New York. And, I have to say, like, one of my favorite things about the city is not, I think, the things that people who come here for a week or two see, which is, Broadway shows or fancy restaurants or all the glam stuff, which is great. I love that. But it's sort of the surprising things that you find, and it's the fact that there's like a bowling alley in Port Authority bus station, or that there's all these community gardens just randomly all over the city. So Mia takes Adam to all these sort of little spots in this sort of night in New York. And a lot of them are sort of my favorite spots. They're all based on they are all real spots in the city, the Brooklyn Heights Promenade. And there's actually, we did a video, which you can get on my website, gailforman.com, which is sort of a tour of a lot of these spots in New York City. So sort of I take you on a tour of some of the settings in Where She Went. I would recommend reading the book first because there's some spoilers, some slight spoilers in the video. But we kind of show you behind the scenes look of sort of where the book takes place, because they are all based on real locations in the city. It's very, very much a New York book.
I definitely think the people who enjoyed Nick and Nora's Infinite Playlist might even enjoy this better. Am I allowed to say that?
Well, I love Nick and Nora.
I mean, it's a fabulous story, but this is so different from it. They both do that trek around New York, but this is such a different feel to it.
This was, Adam and Mia demanded this story to be told, and so I think it's the right way to conclude their story.
Excellent, excellent.
And if you cried on the subway or in public reading If I Stay, be careful. Don't read this one in public.
I have to agree with that. I cried last night.
I have a lot of people who tell me, like, I love this, but I cried on the subway. And so, I'm like, okay, we should put a warning sticker on If I Stay. And then I heard people say, well, I cried Where She Went, too. I'm like, okay, but I didn't kill anybody.
True.